welcome to my very first YouTube video. Yay! So, I have gathered you all here today to have a mini book club session. Over the summer, because of the pandemic, I read all the books I've been meaning to read for a long time now, some even for years. I just never got the chance because of university, and I had to read lots of academic articles, which were interesting and dull sometimes, but it just did not leave a lot of room for reading just for fun. So I took the opportunity to cleanse the mini library that had been accumulating, and I thought I would share my thoughts on these books just in case you also need some new material to read because you read all of yours. Because what else is there to do right now? So without any further ado, let's get started. Okay, so the first book is called The Holy Wild by Danielle Dulski. The best way to describe this book is a self-help book with a witchy spin. Danielle used the elements of nature, such as wind, fire, earth, etc., combined with a wild feminine archetype to create a book that I felt urged readers to reconnect with the outdoors as a way to rediscover themselves. She also reimagined different mythologies to help illustrate her lessons behind each element, which I found really creative and entertaining as a lover of that kind of thing. My personal favorite was the way she illustrated the Persephone and Hades myth. In the original myth, Persephone, the goddess of spring, is kidnapped by Hades and brought to the underworld, where after she eats some pomegranate seeds, is forever trapped there for 6 months out of the year, which explains how winter works. However, in Danielle's version, she shows that even though Persephone is brought to her lowest point, the underworld, multiple times, she is still regarded as the pure goddess of spring and is unruined, which can show that no matter how many times you reach your darkest point, your heart is not ruined, and you can always travel on that metaphorical road to get you out of that darkness. The book also contains activities you can do to really connect with yourself, such as journal prompts, incantations, and dances, which is where I find the witchiness of the book really comes through. I recommend this book for anyone going through a crossroads in their life or are debating whether to make a change or difficult decision. Really, the language she used made me feel like I was the protagonist in this book, and it was so beautifully written, I really recommend it. The next book is probably my favorite from the list. It's called A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. This book appealed to me at first because I love Russian history, and this book is set in the 1920s, when Russia was transitioning out of a monarchy system into socialism. And so it was really great reading this because I think the author did a great job of capturing that time of change, kind of like how Downton Abbey did it, but the Russian version. However, the reason why this is my favorite book is because of the story, which follows the aristocrat Count Alexander Rostov as he is placed under house arrest in the Metropole Hotel permanently. I really grew attached to the Count. I felt like he was a real person, and the side characters were all also wonderfully written as well. Due to COVID, I could kind of relate to his confinement while I was in quarantine, specifically the experiences of boredom, not the potential of being executed by just stepping outside. But it wasn't all gloom. There were a lot of funny and comedic moments that made me laugh out loud. I found these moments were successful because of how well the characters were written, which made these comedic moments read off as a lot more genuine and likely to happen. I also did cry a few times, which is what I feel like makes a good book, if it can make you both laugh and cry. The ending was also amazing. It did not fall flat or disappoint. So yeah, 10 out of 10. Would read again. Highly recommend. Now, after reading A Gentleman in Moscow, I wanted to read something shorter, more simpler, and this book, 15 Dogs by Andre Alexis, was short. I finished it in 2 days or something, but it was much deeper than I expected. The story begins in Toronto, which is kind of fun because I live close to Toronto, and the Greek gods Hermes and Apollo are at a bar chatting, as Greek gods do, and they decide to make a bet where Apollo thinks that any other animal species with human intelligence would be absolutely miserable and never experience joy, while Hermes thinks that it is possible for another animal species to have human intelligence and be happy. So, to settle this, they raid a vet clinic and give the 15 dogs stay in the night human intelligence. When I was first thinking of reviewing this book, I thought I should put a disclaimer that, well, spoiler alert, but not really. There are some dogs that do die in this book, but really they aren't dogs anymore because of the transformation they go through. This book does get very philosophical and discusses themes like language, self-expression, tradition, individual versus community, basically everything that builds up a society or culture. I did enjoy this book though. I felt like one of the gods watching the dogs navigate their new lives because at this point all the gods were picking sides of who would win the bet with popcorn. Like I said, kind of philosophical, but I still enjoyed it. Next on the list, I don't actually own. I borrowed it from my boyfriend and have since returned it, but it's called Cirrus Flux by Matthew Skeleton. Now this is a kid's book, but hear me out. I actually really like the sense of wonderment it brought to the table that sometimes only kids' books can do right. Sometimes you just want to read something at night like it's a bedtime story, and this book had the right amount of history, science, and magic to keep me engaged from start to finish. The plot follows the story of this orphan boy, Cirrus Flux, who lived in London in the 18th century. One day his father's past comes back to interfere with Cirrus's life in the form of a magic globe necklace, and so Cirrus has to go into the world alone as he figures out who his real friends are and who are just trying to use him for this mysterious power. Like I said, it kept me engaged, and the story as a whole is still fresh in my mind even though I read it last month. So, yeah, pretty good. Okay, the final book, I have to say, brought me on quite the journey. It was the Odyssey, specifically the Odyssey by Homer, translated by Robert Fagles. Okay, going into this, I already knew a lot of what was going to go down because in my classics courses, this book was referenced a lot. But since I read the Iliad a while ago, I kind of found it my duty as a student to read this giant. The story follows Odysseus as he returns home from the Trojan War, but since he has been gone for 20-ish years, his home is being overrun by arrogant suitors who are trying to court his wife Penelope and are also plotting to kill his son Telemachus. Besides the adventure-riddled plot, this tale also serves the purpose of showing the morals of the Greek society at that time, like what it means to be a good host versus a bad host, or a good wife versus a bad wife, etc., etc. Lots of adventures, banquets, and cameos from dead heroes from the Iliad, so it was a fun time all in all. But I kind of felt like one character got the short end of the stick by the end of the story. It was Penelope. I think I'll do another video talking about Penelope and my thoughts, and my good friend actually recommended I read the Penelopiad and Circe because apparently they provided two different perspectives on her and were also written by women. So that's kind of refreshing to get a woman's perspective on a very male-dominated society / perspective of a book. But yeah, I'm glad I finally read it, and once I got started, I realized it wasn't as intimidating as I thought it would be, which was great. There's a great intro in the front of this edition if you don't know a lot about Greek mythology, so you have the option to read that for context. And yeah, that is what I read during this quarantine of a summer. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of the books mentioned and your opinions. It's always nice to get a second perspective on things, especially books. Hopefully I inspired you to read one of these, and I think if I were to make a fall version of this video, my new book pile is full of witch novels / historic themed books. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned and subscribe. Thanks for watching and have a great day.